Right, the date is October 25th, 2022, and the time is 4:33 p.m. To ensure we have a quorum present, I'm going to read out the names of members of the Executive Committee, and if you are here, please say present. Colin Clark, present. Dr. Lael Melville.
Present.
Dawn Davidson. Cameron Johnson. Ed Toriak. Andre McEwen. John McPherson.
Present.
Thank you, John. James Stanton. Michael Stack.
Present.
John Beckert.
Present.
Pilar Davies.
Present.
Christine Vandeveld.
Present.
Thank you. I do know we do in fact have a quorum, exactly, right?
Yes, sir.
Of the Executive Committee present, and I call to order this Executive Committee meeting of the Board of Uplift Education. Our first order of business is our mission moment. And so Yasmin, take it away.
All right, we have two mission moments, and I wish that Ricky was here, but he's obviously had a very busy day at work today. And so what happened to Carrie? She's my slide clicker. I will come over and click away. Okay. So this morning was our thank you. If you'll click one more time. Thank you. So this morning we were out at Charles Schwab's new headquarters that opened right before the pandemic. They hosted 220 of our seniors from 11, we have 13 high schools, but 11 that have graduating classes. And the kids spent the morning going through financial literacy classes as part of their MoneyWise America program. And then, of course, they did the big reveal that each of the 220 scholars received a $1,000 scholarship. And it was really special because we're so excited in the room when it was Carrie Schwab announced it. She's the woman in the black suit with her back to us. And I was sharing that one of the Schwab staff members walked into the ladies' room, and one of our scholars was in there with one of our counselors, and she was crying because she said she was so overwhelmed by the moment. She didn't know actually how to process it, which was very, very sweet, because we're very surprised. Like, they had no idea they were getting a scholarship. So basically what this picture is the Schwab staff were lined up with signs, like you can see Welcome North Hills, Welcome Heights, Welcome Uplift Williams, and as the kids' buses pulled up, they walked through a line of cheering Schwab staff members. And then the next picture is basically the room that they were in. So you can see the kids are on the opposite end, but they had photo booths set up, and it was just really fun. And they have a balloon arch, we'll see in a minute, that was super popular with the kids. And then the next picture, this is Carrie Schwab on stage talking with the kids about their day. And then the next picture is me receiving the $220,000 check for our Road to College and Career program before she announced the scholarships. Then the next picture, you can see John and Lael came out to support. So this was at the photo booth. They had all these fun props for the kids to take pictures. So we took a picture with Ricky and had a little bit of a lighthearted moment. And then the next picture here is this is the balloon arch. And this is, I'm with a group of young women from Uplift North Hills, and they all were like super excited. The balloon arch was definitely more popular for the kids to take pictures at than the photo booths, but there you go. So I'm going to pause there for a minute, and just obviously when Ricky's with us in December, we'll be able to say thank you again. But I know Lael was going to say a few words about what it was like to be there.
Oh my gosh. You think the scholars were excited? I was beside myself. I had pictured something that was not this. And when you walked in the room and there were so many balloons and the room was so engaged and ready for our scholars, it was unbelievable. In fact, when the celebration started outside with welcoming the scholars to the space and cheering them on and all of that good stuff, and then they got to this room where they came through this arch and then into the bigger room. It was insane. The candy was on the table.
There was so much candy.
There was so much, but they really did. They were good. I mean, I don't even know how they controlled themselves, but they did not go after the candy. It was making me nervous. But it was a spectacular event. It was visually and content-wise spectacular. From the drive up of the walkway to the campus and the breakout sessions on the campus, well thought out and well executed. The former pro athletes who came to message the event and talk about spending and wise moments in spending, to the gift of $200,000, and then to each of the scholars. I mean, she didn't even gift me, and I wanted to cry. It was just such a moment. I was captivated by the video that they provided early on in this experience of a Latina woman who spoke about not knowing anything about money and being at a college where she wanted to be a part of. So she spent and didn't understand how to engage money, and a bit of her journey on how to do that, how to engage money, and eventually allow her father to retire on the money that she and her siblings were able to save. So that was really wonderful and very timely. Finally, I was so proud of our scholars, but I was also very proud of Yasmin. As you can imagine, she represented Uplift School spectacularly as she was on stage engaging with the president of Schwab. So I firmly believe that anyone who took part in this would have seen the best of Uplift today. So it was great. And thanks for letting me share.
Thank you so much for being part of it. And John, thank you for attending.
Glad to be there. A proud moment.
Well, I know I sure wish I was there, but most important, it's a shame Ricky couldn't be here today, but when he is here, I hope everyone will remember, anyone who hasn't heard this before, this was an amazingly generous gift on the part of Schwab, which he made happen. So he deserves our gratitude. We have another moment.
We have one more moment, and Christine and Paula are going to help me with this one. So we started our teacher appreciation visits, and the first one was at Uplift Williams. So we're going to quickly see a couple pictures. Mike's here with Christine and Pilar, and they are going around with their beverage and treat card, and teachers are getting to pick out something, and they're able to offer their quick words of appreciation. And there's, I think, one more slide. So we'll pause there, and Christine and Pilar, do you want to take a second and just share what that experience was like for y'all?
I mean, it was so much fun. First of all, the teachers were so excited and so pleased, you know, to just have that special treat in the morning. I felt sorry for the kids who had to ogle all of these incredible pastries. And then told that no, they were for the teachers. But it was wonderful to be back in the school. You know, it was just, and so impressive, the energy and the feeling and the way that the students conducted themselves. And I read a thing the other day that said that one of the, you know, privileges of affluent students is a calm and orderly environment. And that was just enforced in every way at the school today. You could just see it through routines and bells and everything else. And so, you know, that's one of the reasons I think people are happy. But anyway, it was great, and I think that the teachers were really pleased.
And I just want to say kudos to Amanda, because I said to Christine that we arrived and she did all the heavy lifting, and I felt like a politician just sitting there shaking hands. So she made it all possible. So huge thank you, Amanda. Anyway, for those of you who would like to sign up and go on a morning to spread cheer and goodwill, it was a ton of fun. So.
And Amanda, I think we're looking pretty good on board member sign-ups.
We are, but we'll double up. So,
Yeah.
send a note to Yasmin if you would like to join, and happy to take more if you're interested in filling your bucket.
I just want to double down on the fact it's super valuable to go in to talk to the teachers. We met one of the counselors there. You know, we met cafeteria staff, and luckily Pilar is bilingual. and you know, it's just like you really get a feeling for the operation that we're guiding here.
Have we filled all of our slots to visit?
We have, but as Amanda said, we can easily have multiple board members go. If someone didn't get a chance to sign up and wants to go, we'll just pair people together. And everyone, just like Pilar and Christine described, you will have a member of the executive team or a managing director or a regional director of ops who will be with you. You won't be wandering the schools alone. We'll guide you. And you get to just do the fun stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you all for doing that.
Yeah,
Our
thank you so much.
next- We're done on that one?
We're done? Yeah.
Our next item of business is the community forum. Alex, do we have any community speakers signed up to speak today?
We do not have any speakers signed up to speak.
Okay, in the absence of that, our next item of business is to consider and take action on the September 23rd, 2022 board retreat minutes. Are there any questions from the board on the recommended minutes?
If anyone needs a paper copy, we had printed some and put them at the front for you, but they're the same as the ones I sent out this morning.
Question?
I move for approval.
Thank you very much. Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any votes against the motion? The motion is approved by unanimous vote. Next, I'll hand it to Kristen Gallion-Devon, Uplift's Director of English Learning Programming for our annual ESL Bilingual Overview. Kristen, you're up. Thank you for all your hard work, by the way, and everything that your team does.
Of course, thank you. Stephanie will kick us off. Yep. So I'm Stephanie. I'm the Senior Director of Academic Support. I've gotten to meet with the board 3 or 4 times over the last few years. And this year, Kristen is here with me. So Kristen is our team's director. Kristen has been with Uplift since 2014 as a Teach America core member, taught at Uplift Infinity, then served Uplift Infinity as our ESL coordinator and has spent time at Uplift building her career, and now she's the director of our English Learner Programming team. So super proud of her. Super happy to have her here with me this evening to talk about our ESL bilingual program. So we've talked about this before, but just a reminder, when we talk about what our service looks like for English learners in our primary grades, so pre-K through 5th grade, what you typically see is that the classroom teacher themselves is ESL certified. And so our youngest scholars are there in the classroom with their classroom teacher all day, getting their services through that support. As our scholars move into 6th grade through 12th grade, what you will typically see is for scholars that are still identified as English learners who still need that additional support, they're pulled out of the classroom for particular services and delivery model that way. So that's just kind of the 2 different models that we run at Uplift. And on the next slide, I have for you just a head count. So everything I'm talking about tonight is our program for last year. It is October. We are well into the 22-23 school year, but I want to give you a report on what happened in 21-22. So this is what our head count was for our English learners last school year. What you see here is pretty much what you should see. English learners make up a solid 1/3 of our network, which is a huge percentage, right? And we have really great language diversity at Uplift, which certainly augments our IB programming. We have 46 different languages represented by our students and families across the network, which is pretty impressive. It makes sense that our head counts are lower in kindergarten, 1st grade, pre-K, because that's when students are getting used to the academic environment, we're still getting to know them and learning them, and we're making decisions about who actually qualifies or identifies as an English learner. And then you see those numbers start to drop toward the end of their time with Uplift because they've built their English skills, of course, and we're exiting them from the program. I think one thing that's a little interesting about Uplift that may not be the case at a traditional ISD is that we tend to get a bump in 6th grade and then a bump again in 9th grade because we typically get new scholars who have been at an ISD who are now enrolling in Uplift. So that's where we tend to see like tick-ups in our English learner head counts. That is something that other school districts may not be encountering. So that's interesting. You want to see a bell curve here. Ideally, the bell curve is peaking somewhere around 3rd or 4th grade. Yep. And I think I'm going to pass it off to Kristen from here.
Great, so I'm going to talk about the data from last year. So I'm first going to touch on TELPAS. TELPAS is the state-mandated test to assess all ELs in their language proficiency. They are tested in 4 different domains: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. You will not see writing on here as it has a different scale score as that's rated by the teacher. That's changing this year. It is now all online, which we're thankful for. But these are all rated by the state, and so you will see the progress from reading, speaking, and listening. As you see, pre-COVID and then COVID, we make a major dip in our speaking scores. And I think that's pretty natural as scholars were wearing masks, they were 6 feet apart and didn't have a lot of academic opportunity to utilize their academic language. So that's something that we are really focusing on now and making sure that all 4 of these domains are incorporated into every classroom, pre-K through 12th grade. So our STAR scores, so this will be for our kiddos 3 through 8. So our math and reading scores. I'm excited to see that we did see progress this year in both math and reading. I'm exceptionally proud of the reading scores as we've surpassed our pre-COVID number of that. And we put a lot of emphasis on Tier 1 instruction, so that's classroom support, right, with as many ELs as possible. So I think that is being reflected in our reading scores increasing there on STAR, and look forward to seeing that increase. And as a network, we are really focusing on math, so I presume that to increase this year as well. Our STAR EOC score, so this will be for our high school scholars. You can see the subject tested below. In all, we increased in scores in all of the tests except for biology. We're staying a bit stagnant. That is a pretty academic, vocabulary heavy test. So again, hitting that and making sure that we're incorporating academic vocabulary really authentically in our 9th grade biology classrooms. You will see a little gap in U.S. history due to the pandemic of no scholars being able to test in that year. So there's no data point to be compared for those years. So again, we are not quite at pre-pandemic scores yet, but we are hopeful to get there, especially with this push in the classroom and supports in all of our classrooms, and specifically targeting 9th grade this year to see those scores increase. Last piece of data here is our map, so network-wide assessment, looking back 3 years, and this dark blue is all scholars in Uplift, so that includes our ELs. The light blue is ELs only. You can see that our gap is lessening. This is the overall RIT score, so we need to increase that overall, all scholars and ELs, but we have lessened that gap, again, a little bit between our general population of scholars and our ELs, so something to be proud of is lessening that gap and continuing to do so. So a bit of progress. We had 44% of our teachers ESL certified here. That means that our scholars have a teacher in front of them that is prepared and has taken the ESL supplemental exam, something that we continue to push for. And I'm also excited that Talent has partnered with our team to make that a requirement, with sending additional incentives to get ESL certified, and just notices to teachers to keep them on track to be getting certified in a timely manner. We've increased, I kind of mentioned this Tier 1 support. So a lot of our support prior to this year was Tier 2, so in a small group intervention setting, and so we have expanded that to reach the most amount of ELs as we're touching the classrooms. And we really focused on grades kinder, 3rd, 6th, and 9th last year to really make sure that teachers are getting targeted supports in those grade levels to, again, reach a majority of our ELs rather than a very targeted small group of scholars. This has shown, as we saw the STAR reading scores, I really think that helps contribute to that for our ELs, especially in 3rd grade. We saw our 3rd graders outperform, our 3rd grade ELs outperform their peers, which was a big achievement for our EL kiddos. And then Algebra, English 1, 2, and 3, we all did see growth in those areas. We also have an increased number of scholars who have been in the U.S. for 3 years or less, and they were at the same about level scoring as their other EL peers in algebra and biology. So that is noting that we're giving them correct supports in the classrooms for scholars that are low English proficiency. And then lastly, I already know this, but the STAR reading scores have surpassed pre-pandemic scores. And so we are proud of that and making sure that we continue onward and upward from there.
So that's where we were this past school year. I just want to give you a little bit of like a peek of where we're headed this year and what Kristen and I are prioritizing. So we've reorganized our team of campus coordinators. Prior till now, every campus had a coordinator that supported both compliance and instruction. Those are two really meaty jobs and really hard things to figure out, especially when a third of the student body are English learners, right? So what Kristen and I were able to do was create a coordinator position that focused on compliance, a coordinator position that focused on instruction, which means I have employees who get to specialize and get really, really good at one thing in the support they deliver to that campus. So a campus enjoys the services of an instruction coordinator and a compliance coordinator. I think we're already starting to see payoff there in terms of the support that we can provide to campuses. We're expanding how we support in the classrooms as opposed to those pull-out settings, since we saw such great payoff with that last year, especially with third grade. Kristen and her team have built out ELP Academy, which is where they have like evening classes that teachers come to prepare for the ESL supplemental exam. I was up here a couple of weeks ago and it was like 6 o'clock on a Tuesday night, and this room, I'm not kidding, is packed with teachers doing like a coursework with one of Kristen's employees. And like they're so passionate about working for the kids, and I just thought it was really cool to see that they've built a structure to capitalize on that enthusiasm and push us toward more of those teachers getting that certification, which is, it's a quite difficult test to pass. We're in the early process of investigating and figuring out what a dual language program would look like at Uplift. So we provide an English as a second language program. At a lot of schools in the area, they instead provide a bilingual program where a child might get instruction in both English and Spanish if you're in the state of Texas. So we are starting to figure out what that could look like at Uplift and which campuses would be the best ones to roll that out at. I'm sure I'll have more to share on that in a year. And then finally, this last bullet point, so REILs, that stands for Recently Arrived Immigrant English Learners. So those are children that have been in the United States school system for 3 years or less. They come with a tremendous set of assets, right? They have a whole other culture they're familiar with. They have a whole other language they're fluent in. It's awesome. The U.S. school system also presents them with a ton of challenges, right? And we are really seeing those numbers increase. So we have about 130 of them in the network this school year. But what's interesting is that is more than twice what we had in Uplift last year. And Kristen and I both think those numbers are going to continue to increase pretty rapidly. So we are doing our best to get ahead of that. We have some curriculum that we're piloting in schools that we hope will meet those kids where they are and just make sure that we're not discounting all the assets that they bring and that we're able to use those to push their academic performance forward.
Are they coming in at all grade levels or primarily?
Great question.
Yes, so all grade levels, we've definitely seen an increase. We're really tracking it 6 and up, and so we've seen especially an increase in high school.
But yeah, all grade levels. It's interesting, more than twice as many, like that's a huge increase in 1 year, right? Yeah, so we gotta get ahead of that, even if right now it's only 130 kids. That's my last slide for you, so we're happy to take any other questions or feedback you have for us.
Other questions from the board?
Could you go back a couple of slides to any of the ones that have, this would be, one more forward would be fine, I think. Sorry, this may be an eyesight problem.
No,
Old man eyesight in the back row here. The scale on the left.
Yes.
is-
So for MAP, it's the average RIT score. So that is compared to scholars nationally, and it puts them in a quintile 1 through 5. And so anything below 40 really is saying that they are like at-risk scholars.
So for example, here we've got all of our population in about the 45th percentile performance versus our English learners who are at about the 33rd percentile.
33rd meaning at risk.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm trying to get a sense of what the scale means.
Yes,
Yep.
and then the other scores were scale score that is put out by the state.
Yeah. And does it have a similar meaning?
It associates somewhat to like does not meet.
Can you go to the TELPAS?
Semesters, things like that. There. And then yes, TELPAS. So it equates to, rather than a score like that, it is beginning, intermediate, advanced, high. And
Yeah.
so those kind of would equate to that, which is we're like in the average of intermediate, advanced, more in the advanced composite overall scores. And in order to lead this program, they have to get advanced high across the board in all 4 of those domains of listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and pass their STAR test.
Other questions from the board? Stephanie, I didn't introduce you properly at the beginning, but Stephanie and Kristen, thank you for the vital work you do for our scholars at Uplift.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we will hear from Dennis Vasquez, Uplift's Director of Restricted Programs, for an overview of state compensatory education funding. And I hope I've introduced you correctly.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dennis Vasquez. I've been with Uplift since 2010, handling our state restricted and federal programs. And wanted to introduce you tonight to our new policies and procedures. We've actually been doing this process really since 2015, I believe, when we consolidated the charters. But there's been a couple of new changes in the state compensatory education rules, and I'm just going to go over a very high level on what we're talking about. And I believe you have
Yes, I
handouts?
just passed.
Okay. So the first couple of pages are really just where you can find the requirements in the Texas Education Code. This is a policy and procedure, so it covers what legally we're required to do to help spend these state compensatory education dollars. It's a $25.6 million program this year at Uplift, so it's pretty big. It serves close to 60% of our scholars, and it is because it has so many different components that, like we just heard about the English learners, which is one of our at-risk populations, but page 7 starts the actual qualification for what could make a scholar at risk. So I'm not going to read through all the Texas Education Code language. I'm going to let you guys read that on your own. But on page 7, these are the eligibility criteria that would make a scholar considered at risk and could receive additional services, and why we go with most of our schools have these additional supports that help our scholars learn. The first one is going to be if they're in elementary grades, if they didn't perform satisfactorily on one of our assessments. So math is what we use for the early assessments, and math and reading. So that's one of the things, if we've identified scholars who are below that 40th level we said in reading, in middle school grades through high school, 7th to 12th, if they didn't maintain an average of 70 or more in 2 core subjects, that could qualify them as at risk. Number 3 would be if they didn't advance from 1 grade level. That includes in kindergarten if a parent wants them retained. If they've ever been retained, that's also an at-risk indicator. Number 4 is if they didn't perform satisfactorily on one of our STAR assessments. That's one of the things that can qualify them as at risk. Number 5 is if they're pregnant or parent, teen parent. So that is one that doesn't affect a lot of our students, but it is another thing that we've seen as a growing concern, especially since COVID. But we are now looking at should we use some of these funds for pregnancy-related services, because we're hearing the need, and Remy and I had a conversation in August about maybe we should develop some additional programs to provide homebound supports for these scholars if they are in school pregnant, and then the doctor requires them to be homebound. It's not a huge need, but it is something that's on our radar, and we're starting to prepare for services for those scholars as well. In the past, it's been just one-offs where we've had to send people home, but now we're ready to kind of develop a better, broader program. Number 6 is secondary. If they've ever been involved in an alternative education program, like from another district, they come to us from the alternative ed or district or disciplinary AEP, or even with the county, the juvenile JJAEP is what it's called, Juvenile Justice Alternative Education Program. If they've ever been expelled from another school. Number 8, if they're currently on probation or parole or deferred education. Number 9, if they were previously reported as a dropout through our PEAMS data collection system. Number 10, if they're an English learner, which again we've seen is a third of our population already. Number 11, if they're in the custody of the Department of Family Protective Regulatory Services, if they're in foster care or temporary placement. Number 12, if they're identified as homeless. Number 13 is if they're in the preceding school year were in a residential placement facility. And then in the last 2 years, they've added 2 more. Whereas if the students, if we identify that their parents have ever been incarcerated, that's also an at-risk indicator. And the newest one they added this year is if students currently enrolled in an alternative education program. That does not apply to any of our students because they're already here with us, but that is a statewide element. The state also allows us to adopt any locally developed criteria if we wanted to. We've not done that in the past. We talked about it a couple of years ago when COVID hit and we started trying to find those scholars who weren't attending because of COVID, but we didn't actually implement a local policy at that. They also require that we identify the students and we also identify criteria to exit the scholars if they no longer meet those criteria. So that's what this policy and procedure is about. The other thing is required to monitor, page 11 talks about the type of services that we can provide for our scholars. All of our Uplift campuses do have access to the state compensatory education program funds, and so that does serve everyone, including North Hills. North Hills is the only campus that doesn't receive Title I scholars, but this one is a state level fund that does serve all scholars across the network. We can monitor this by looking at our groups of students, again, depending on which type of criteria they qualify under. And right now we're currently doing that wrap up. The snapshot date is Friday, so all of our schools are currently reviewing the data for the current school year and let us know which of their kids meet these criteria. And so I wanted to make sure we got this in front of the board and get it approved if you guys have any questions. All the criteria are there on when we can exit them as well. And at the very last appendices, I put just our procedures for how we handle that in-house with our processes through our Uplink and through our data dashboard that we have from the data team. Any questions?
Dennis, I don't think you should, sorry if you didn't, I missed it. This is the first time we've actually had to bring our documentation of this to the board. Normally, you have all this in place in these documents, but it's now an audit requirement, and so we wanted to bring it forward and share with you all what we basically do for the past several years.
Yeah, that was a new audit requirement. It's on schedule J4, I think, of the audit last year and this year. But I want to make sure we have the latest criteria also board approved. So, any questions?
Okay. Hearing none, Dennis, thank you very much for the very important work that you and your team do for all our scholars.
Thank you.
Next up, we're going to ask Alex for a review of the state intruder detection audit process and findings.
Yeah.
Alex, you're up.
Great, thank you, Cullum. So this is sort of a unique overview for a couple of reasons. Number one, the state is understandably very clear that any information regarding security and security processes therein are not to be discussed in open session, which we're in right now, but they can be discussed and we can take questions and whatnot in closed session. However, with respect to the new state intruder detection audit, they do have some information that they want provided in open session to the board. Hence why there's no deck, so there's no necessarily any documentation that could be otherwise perceived as something that should have been presented in closed session. That being said, the state intruder detection audit is a new process. Y'all may have heard of it. It comes out of the Uvalde tragedy. It took several months for the state, I think, to kind of work on and refine. In essence, what it entails are state intruder auditors from the different regions of the state. The state is broken into numerous regions. We are in regions 10 and regions 11. That's per TEA. So we have auditors from the two regions that come to our schools and they audit it. And the audit is comprised of 3 parts. The first part is an intruder detection audit, where they come in plain clothes, but they, identify themselves and not trying to break into the building or anything along those lines. That was sort of a concern when we first started hearing about this process, that was going to be something they were going to try to do. That's not what they're doing. They're not trying to break in. They're not trying to sneak anything like that. What they are trying to do is, and what their purpose is to walk around the building, working with our campus leaders to see if there are any exterior doors that they're able to access and gain entry into the building. So that's one part. The second part is a review of our exterior door internal audits. Is it every week? Yeah, it's weekly. So every week, every one of our schools has to do an internal audit of our exterior doors to make sure they're locked and working appropriately and whatnot. The second phase of TEA's audit is to ensure that we are actually doing those weekly internal audits and the paperwork is there and whatnot. The third part of the intruder detection audit is, it's kind of the unique part of the audit. Every district and charter in the state has the option of having a policy, a board adopted policy, that requires classroom doors be locked, shut and locked at all times. If the charter or ISD has that policy in place, then that will become part of the audit and they will walk around the inside of the school and check a random assortment of doors. So I've had to have a few conversations with the state because we do not have a board policy, which is perfectly fine, but we do have an internal administrative rule that classroom doors should be shut and locked at all times. I think there is sort of a reasonableness component to it, like if you're not in class and you need to go use the restroom or something like that, you do not need to keep your door locked, there's no scholars in there, etc. The audit findings, so far we've had 4 schools go through the audit. We have passed, in all phases, the first 2 parts of the audit at all 4 schools. We were flagged at 3 of our campuses for the closed door being locked at North Hills Secondary, North Hills Primary, and Luna Secondary. The state requires us to actually tell you the schools. What's interesting about that again is it's sort of a work in progress with the state, number one, and if they find 1 door, that means you're going to be flagged. So it doesn't necessarily have to be 20 or 30 doors, because obviously there are any number of classroom doors. So it's a little wonky, the findings. In working with Alan Tollison, who kind of oversees all of our safety and security measures here, candidly, I think we've done exceptionally well on the audits for the 4 schools that we have that have gone through the audit so far. Obviously, we do want to create space to answer any questions you may have. So to do so, what I'm going to ask is for Cullum to take us into closed session, and then we can address any questions you may have on the audit. And then I know Alan and our Chief People Officer has an item as well for closed session. So Cullum, if you could please take us into closed session.
Is everybody clear on the requirements we have under law? Okay. The board will now move into closed session pursuant to sections 551.071, 551.072, 551.074, 551.076, and 551.089 of the Texas Government Code. The time is now 5:11 and we are in closed session, and I believe Yasmin, Alex, and Ann will stay. The board is now back in open session. The time is 5:40 p.m. and I note here the same quorum of the board is present. I also note that the board did not take any action or vote during closed session. Do I have a motion to approve the CEO compensation and benefits plan as proposed by the compensation committee?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Are there any votes against the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved by unanimous vote. Is there any other business to come before the board? In the absence of any, this meeting is adjourned. The time is now 5:41. Thank you everyone for your service.